Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to my, I think I'm going to change the fact that it's true crime, but I want your input on that because it began as the Epi Project. I then called it Kirby Summers True Crime Podcast, but I noticed that I have just been calling it just my name. Now, I am testing the platform on StreamYard, as some of you might know, so that I can stream live. And I am sort of building a logo around the word truth, because what I bring to you in my podcast and in my newsletters is the truth that is really hidden underneath many layers of lies. So I'm just curious, do I go with just my name? Do I keep going with Kirby Summers True Crime because I do cover crime, things that have happened in other instances, or do I create something around the word truth? I'm just curious to hear what you have to say. I'm going to be discussing the role of Satan and how it's used for psychological operations to control you and me, basically the masses. However, before I get started, I want to really thank a couple of people. I want to thank Suzanne Donahue, 865, for your super thanks. And by the way, people have been sending me messages asking how they can do a super thanks. So like if you look at the screen, there are three little dots at the bottom of the right-hand side. And if you click on those little dots, you can do a super thanks. And that's for any channel that's approved. And I also want to thank, oh my God, there's another person I want to thank, and I don't have his name here. So I will have to get that and thank him in the next one. I also, however, want to thank Marina B for leaving this comment on my podcast of yesterday. And my podcast of yesterday was titled "The Beatles Have a Tangential Connection with the Unaliving of John F. Kennedy." And she writes, because she is also a member of my Substack and has been following my work for a very long time. She wrote, she gave you a little read here, but you guys gotta sign up for our Substack. The articles are ridiculously good and detailed with dates and names and places. And then she capped this. There's a reader function that reads the articles like an audiobook for when you're driving or otherwise engaged. Just phenomenal content that is worth every penny. Thank you, Kirby, for doing what you do and sharing this with us. And then she writes to me, huge appreciation for the reminder that our friendly Mockingbird Press is always there to tell us what to look at and what to think about. Not that it was an accomplishment, but I've come to the conclusion Taylor Swift is one of many psyops, the new so-called Beatles. So thanks for that. That's really appreciated. And many thanks again to everybody who goes out of your way to comment and or like, because it helps the algorithm. And if you can share these videos that I'm uploading here on this platform for you, that would help, because I am somewhat, BANNED shadow, and I reverse those words and you get what I'm talking about. And so the three-letter agency has had a war against the family unit and us as individuals for a very long time. So basically what we're seeing with the Sean Combs case, and by the way, I don't buy the fact that they're again trying to say he's a one-off, right? He's a one-off because his mother had, this is the latest news, he's a one-off because his mother had parties where people that didn't have very great morals would show up. Well, clearly not, because they were living in a poor neighborhood. And that the people would be made to feel very comfortable was the gist of the article, meaning that they would go off into various rooms in the home where she was raising Sean Combs, and that's where he got and do their thing, and that's why he is what he is. I'm going to tell you, no, I was born in a very poor neighborhood. The mothers, mostly single mothers, would have parties, meaning we would have our mothers invite their friends, which were of equal stature, meaning nobody had the means. And it was, it was to play music, dance, have, entertainment, because clearly they could not afford. If you grow up in the ghetto like I did, you couldn't afford, our parents did not have the money, nor did Sean Combs have the money to go out and party at the so-called clubs. We were not people who went to the store club. That said, in my case, my father did play. He was a musician, and he played at places like the Stork Club. However, I do not buy the fact that his mother introduced him to this lifestyle. This lifestyle is part and parcel of not just primarily of the entertainment industry, but also of the psychological operations that continue against us to present day. So for example, we have seen, many of you have heard me talk about Gloria Steinem, who infiltrated the women's liberation movement and who was placed on the cover of Time magazine in 1970 with a poster saying, "We shall overcome." Now, Time magazine is a vehicle of the three-letter agency. I believe that I wrote a very detailed article on Substack, and I go into how CIA was created. I name who created it, and I describe some of the magazines that were used for promoting their ideals. And of course, if you ever see anybody on the cover of Time magazine, like we see Gloria Steinem back in 1970 proclaiming "We shall overcome," you have to then say that's not somebody who's really on our side. This is somebody who has been inserted into the fabric of our lives to subvert it. So I'm also going to be talking about Anton LaVey. So in 1966, just 4 years before our friend Steinem shows up on the cover of Time magazine, a young American occultist founded the Church of Satan in California. While the name of his church was controversial, this was really just the beginning. So he hosted Wild, ORGIES, and he published a Bible, but it was a different kind of Bible. It was an SATAIC Bible. Now he became infamous in the press. Listen to me carefully. He became infamous in the press, meaning that Mockingbird Media covered everything he did. Mockingbird Media would not have covered everything he did, even if it was to say it was controversial, if they were not hand in hand part of an operation against the citizenry, okay? That means the populace, whether you are in the US or the UK or Australia or Canada or New Zealand or Africa. And I looked at the list of countries of where the people are who follow my work. And clearly I have followers from all over the world. So wherever you are in the world, these psychological operations are also targeting you. So, this is just all of us. And so, although LaVey was actually an atheist, he wanted to celebrate the bad guy, right? So Satan as a symbol of human liberation and freedom. So initially, that is how they began to promote that lifestyle. And then the feminist social engineering goes back long time ago. Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Bavarian Illuminati in 1776, said, "There is no way of influencing men so powerfully as by means of the women. These should therefore be our chief study. We should insinuate ourselves into their good opinion, give them hints of emancipation from the tyranny of public opinion, and of standing up for themselves. It will be an immense relief to their enslaved minds to be freed from any one bond of restraint, and it will fire them the more and cause them to work for us with zeal." I'm going to repeat that line. It will cause them to work for us with zeal, therefore enslaving women, not liberating women. And then I'm going to continue with what he said in 1776, "Without knowing what they do, for they will only be indulging their own desire of personal admiration." Frankly, he could have said that in 1966. It would not have been out of place, right? The key to understanding the three-letter agency is they didn't fund her out in the open. And the question is, why? And the answer is because it's not within the legal scope of the three-letter agency to engage in domestic operations. Remember, they were created ostensibly for operations in other countries. However, if you have been a subscriber to my channel, if you have been listening to my podcast, if you have been reading my work, if you are on my Patreon, you will know that they are part of our everyday lives. So that if you study real history, which is difficult to do, because this information is not in history books, you don't learn it in school, because what you're taught in schools is complete nonsense. They have done this, meaning the three-letter agency has in fact engaged in domestic operations against the citizens from the very beginning, despite the fact they do not and did not have a mandate to do this. And so a man by the name of Aaron Russo claimed that David Rockefeller, who is part of that group, he is not the head of it by any means, as some people are claiming online, that David Rockefeller told him personally. And, the point being that it's never been about protecting American interests, but frankly, it was founded by Wall Street bankers and attorneys, originally intended as an intelligence gathering agency. It was subsumed by the Office for Policy Coordination, which specializes in dirty tricks. So we remember we had our dirty trickster, right? Richard Nixon. We have somebody like Roger Stone. So we have a bunch of tricks that are played on the public, and delving into the Satanic world is one of the tricks used. That is why you see Jay-Z and Beyonce displaying the hand signs. There's symbolism everywhere. It's on our dollar bill. It's at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. There's symbolism everywhere. But this is symbolism that is, initially it was only recognized by others in the club, right? Normal people didn't stop to think about it as it pertained to the fact that they're in a club and it doesn't include us. So the number one priority that they had was to destroy the family unit. It represents the greatest threat to the three-letter agency and the world they want to create, because a functional family is self-sufficient and it is not reliant on the state for support or guidance. And growing up with a functional family, your odds of succumbing to antisocial behavior, like we have seen with Sean P. Diddy Combs, and like a laundry list of people that are in his circle and or have been exposed at other times, are significantly decreased, right? So if you come from a good family, chances are you're not going to get caught up in this demonic stuff. And so your educational success and the chances of you reproducing and providing a stable childhood for your children increases. So to destroy the self-sufficient family, you make the women, the mothers of the family, question their role by making their role seem oppressive, like being in a prison. So you have social media, you have TV, you have Hollywood, you have the mainstream media push this agenda either in a subliminal manner or overtly, And so this, coupled with the fact that women are now forced to work for financial reasons, creates an atmosphere where the mother of the self-sufficient family unit is absent at increasing rates for their own independence, right? So women want to be independent, they have this, but contrary to the popular social structures from a purely biological standpoint, you got to admit that the women in our species are not just meant to bear the children, they're also meant to care for the children. Okay, we see this in the animal kingdom. The mothers care for their children, for their offspring. And so you take that away, as they did with the so-called women's liberation movement, and everything falls to pieces. The other thing that happens is that the fathers, the head of the family, starts to question their role as providers, and it reduces the testosterone hormone, and it starts to demasculate the men. And this is done through the use of pornography. The number one thing is pornography. Social media, television, Hollywood, and mainstream media pushing the narrative. And so the man's natural tendencies to protect and provide become toxic. They become kind of mixed up with this world that is presented to them by the forces that work collaboratively within that three-letter agency, be it in the United States or be it in other countries where the agency clearly has a different name. And then there are certain parts of the male demographic that are taken out of the homes, right? And they're put into the criminal justice system, mostly due to the ever-increasing threat of poverty. So it's not a surprise that we see Gloria Steinem having a 9-year relationship with J. Stanley Pottinger. And it's not surprising. Pottinger, by the way, was one of the attorneys who worked on behalf, I'm saying this, and I want you to like really follow this carefully. Ostensibly, J. Stanley Pottinger and David Boies were working on behalf of the victims of Jeff. But because one of the victims was infiltrated, from it's my understanding, and I believe many of you are now aware as well, by Pottinger on a personal level. So therefore, he took advantage of the fact that this was a severely disturbed person, traumatized, and had relations with her, at which point he would drink. And we have heard Kay Griggs talk about the fact that her husband, who was also three-letter agency guy, would drink and spill all the secrets. And that's what apparently, allegedly, according to this victim, Pottinger would do with her. And he told her specifically he was working for the CIA. And he told her, if you only knew what Gloria Steinem really did to the family unit, because on top of everything else, there was then additional money for the government in terms of taxes, because now you have a secondary class of people working. But the goal is to make everyone a slave. So we're all slaves at this point, right? We're all working, and everything, as we can see with the California situation, if the prices were not going up every day for just food and shelter and what you need just to get by, that catastrophe that's currently happening is going to just literally like spread, there's going to be additional price gouging. The housing costs will continue to go up. They just want to literally make it so that we are not powerful. But so many of us are becoming powerful, having a voice like we have together here, being able to express the fact that we know what you're up to. Okay. I mean, to realize that Anton LaVey used the satanic angle in order to destabilize the family. Who else have you heard discuss it in that manner? And doesn't it make sense? So in the photo that I'm using for this podcast, I'm using a photo of Pottinger with his girlfriend of 9 years, Gloria Steinem, with Marlo Thomas, who was in a show during the 1970s called That Girl. In fact, I don't know, maybe I'll use just That Girl. I don't know. We are talking about how they have really wrecked the home, and their entry into wrecking the home and our families and our children and our grandchildren, it was through the what they felt was the weakest link. But they've done it for hundreds of years, and they did it through the family. And so shows like That Girl, which starred Marlo Thomas, who then married Phil Donahue. And what did Phil Donahue have? Just like Oprah, right? He had a daytime television program geared at who? Geared at women who were still in the house. Because hurry up, we got to just ensure that you start leaving the house. Oh, Jesus. After Steinem was outed by the Reds, there was a group called the Red Stockings. She came out and said lots of really nice things about the three-letter agency and that she was helping youth movements. However, what happened was that one of Jeff's friends, Mort Zuckerman, who was also a very close friend, in fact, they shared homes and wives, is the attorney David Boies. So Mort Zuckerman, and give me a second, I'm going to turn off my phone so that I'm not interrupted. He then funded, and I'm using quotes around the word funded, Gloria's Ms. Magazine. So there are people like Zucker like Zuckerman, just like I have explained in the case of Rockefeller through the arts movement in the early days, that are conduits for the money, not out of their pockets, by the way, but conduits for the money that belongs to the three-letter agency. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to say that one of the things that came out in the 1980s when it was learned about the Franklin situation during the Ronald Reagan administration, where George H.W. Bush was his vice president, is that one of the survivors was able to say that the monies used by the TRAFFICKING of the not able to consent was used by the three-letter agency to fund the Iran-Contra. And so that how did they get these children? From broken homes, right? From clearly parents who couldn't take care of them. Why? Because for 300 plus years, there has been a war against us, you and me and our families. And we have to learn how to absorb what we're told and understand to look at it objectively, so that you don't just say, oh, well, that's a popular show, I'm going to watch it. Well, sometimes if you watch it, you're going to aspire to be like everyone who was watching it. So like in the case of that girl with Marlo Thomas, everyone wanted to be, quote, that girl. They copied her hairstyle. We saw that also in the show Friends. Friends was used to gear the populace into the fact that, well, you're no longer going to be able to afford to live in your own home or your own apartment. You're going to have to learn to have roommates, because you're not going to be able to afford your own home and your own apartments. And so that show, Friends, was geared for that. So know that everything that we absorb in popular culture, that is promoted in the entertainment industry, that is promoted through your mainstream media sources, that there is a covert psychological component to that. Okay, I am curious to hear what you have to say. And once again, I want to thank all of you for your ongoing words of encouragement. It really helps me tremendously. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.